I was standing in my mother's dining room, surrounded by 38 guests, when my father lifted his glass, smiled like everything was normal, and said, "Lily isn't really part of this family anymore." No one laughed. Not my husband sitting right next to me, not my mother who kept her eyes on her plate, not even my sister, who was the reason we were all there in the first place. I remember the sound of silverware stopping, the air going still, and the way my name just disappeared from the room like it had never belonged there. Then my father slid a thin envelope across the table right in front of everyone and said, "Sign it, let's not drag this out." It was a disownment letter, printed, signed, prepared. Like they had planned this moment down to the minute. And the worst part wasn't the paper. It was that no one looked surprised. Before I go on, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read them. My name is Lily Harper. I'm 29 years old, and that night at my mother's anniversary dinner was the moment my entire family erased me like I was a problem they had finally decided to solve. But this didn't start at that table. It started years earlier, in a house where love always came with conditions and silence was the price of belonging. Growing up, there were rules no one said out loud, but everyone followed. My father controlled everything, money, decisions, even the tone of conversations, and my mother made sure nothing ever challenged him. My younger sister, Ava, was the center of everything, the one they invested in, protected, and praised, while I became the one who fixed things. The one who stayed late, covered mistakes, paid small bills when no one else noticed, kept peace when things cracked. I wasn't ignored. I was used. If something went wrong, I handled it. If someone needed help, I showed up. And if I ever said no, the room would go quiet in a way that made it clear I had just crossed a line. I told myself it was normal, that families worked like this, that eventually, if I kept proving myself, things would balance out. But they never did. They just took more time, more energy, more of me. Until the night everything finally broke. The night my sister needed something I refused to give. The night my father decided I had stopped being useful. And the truth is, as I stood there with that envelope in front of me and 38 people watching, there was something none of them knew. Something I had been quietly building, piece by piece, while they were busy deciding I didn't matter. And when that truth finally came out, it wouldn't just change how they saw me. It would explain why I never signed that paper. The first time I understood my place in that family, I was 8 years old, standing in our backyard, holding a second-place ribbon from a school art competition that I had spent 3 weeks working on, and my father barely glanced at it before saying, "That is nice, Lily." Then turning to my sister Ava, who had just finished a piano recital inside, clapping like she had just performed at Carnegie Hall. I remember standing there, waiting for him to ask me what I painted, what it meant, anything, but he never did, and that was the moment I learned something simple. Attention in our house was not given, it was earned, and I was not earning it the right way. Ava always did. She knew how to talk, how to smile, how to make people feel like they mattered, and my parents rewarded that with everything: better gifts, better praise, better patience. I got what was left over. When I was 13, my mother handed me a list the morning of Thanksgiving, 10 dishes, cleaning tasks, and a schedule written down to the minute, while Ava was told to rest because she had a big week. I cooked for 8 hours that day, set the table, served every plate, and when guests arrived, my mother introduced me as Lily, she helps out, while Ava was introduced as our daughter, the one applying to top schools. I did not say anything. I just kept moving. That became my role. The one who handled things quietly. When my father forgot to pay a utility bill, I paid it from my part-time job savings. When Ava missed a deadline for a college application, I stayed up until 2 in the morning helping her rewrite her essay while she complained about being tired. When my parents argued behind closed doors about money, I heard everything, and somehow it always ended with my name being mentioned as the one who could figure something out. I did not realize it then, but I was not part of the family structure. I was the support system holding it together. The shift happened when I was 23, the year Ava decided to launch her own boutique business with money my parents did not have. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when my father said, "We just need a little help getting it off the ground." And all three of them turned to look at me at the same time. It was not a question. It never was. I transferred $8,000 that night, almost everything I had saved from working 2 jobs after college. They called it support. I told myself it was temporary. But it was not. It became a pattern, small requests turning into expectations, expectations turning into obligations, and every time something went wrong, they came to me to fix it, because that was who I had always been to them. The one who made problems disappear. The one who absorbed the damage so everything else could look perfect from the outside. And for a long time, I let them. Until the day I realized something that I could not ignore anymore. Something that made everything feel different, because for the first time in my life, I saw clearly that if I kept saying yes, there would be nothing left of me to save. And that was the moment everything inside me started to change. It did not happen all at once. It never does. It started with small things that felt off but easy to ignore, like the way my father stopped asking me about money and started assuming I would handle it. Or how my mother began speaking for me in conversations, telling people I had flexible work and no real responsibilities. Like my time did not belong to me anymore. But the moment everything shifted was the night Ava called me crying, saying her business was about to collapse because of a supplier issue and she needed immediate help. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, laptop open, reviewing numbers she sent me, realizing the problem was not one shipment, it was months of mismanagement. But she kept saying, "You always fix things, Lily. Just tell me what to do." And I stayed up until 3 in the morning building a plan, calling contacts, even wiring another $3,000 to keep her afloat for the week. And the next morning, I woke up to a message that changed everything. It was from my father, short, direct, and completely out of nowhere. "We need to talk about your behavior." I stared at it, confused, until another message came through, this time from my mother. "I do not know why you would do something like this to your own sister." And my chest tightened because I had no idea what they were talking about, so I called Ava, but she did not answer. I called again, nothing. Then 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a group text from both my parents, and there it was. A screenshot, an email that looked like it came from me, sent to one of Ava's major suppliers, canceling her contract and claiming her business was unstable as whirly as like enter ins FTDD. The email had my name, my signature, even details that only someone close would know, and beneath it, my father wrote, "Explain this." I felt my hands go cold as I read it again and again, trying to understand how something like that even existed. I had never written that email, never contacted that supplier. But before I could respond, another message came through, this time from Ava. "I trusted you." Just 3 words, no explanation, no question, just a statement that already decided I was guilty. I called her again. Voicemail. I texted back. I did not send that, but no one replied, not that day, not the next. Instead, the silence spread, calls stopped, messages unanswered. And then I started hearing things from people outside the family, a mutual acquaintance asking me why I would sabotage my own sister, a coworker mentioning they heard I was having issues at home. And that was when I realized this was not just a misunderstanding. This was a story that had already been told, already believed, and I was the last one to hear it. I went back to that screenshot, zoomed in, looking for anything that did not make sense, and that was when I saw it. A small detail most people would miss. The timestamp did not match my time zone. It was off by exactly 3 hours, which meant the email was not sent from where I was. But none of that mattered anymore, because by the time I tried to explain, by the time I tried to show proof, the damage was already done, and the moment it all collapsed was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was me standing in my apartment, phone in my hand, realizing that the people I had spent my entire life protecting had already decided who I was without me, and there was nothing I could say that would change it. For the first few days, I refused to believe it was over. I kept thinking if I just explained it the right way, if I showed them the detail they missed, they would see it, they would realize none of it made sense. So I called my father again, and again, and again, 12 times in one afternoon until it went straight to voicemail without even ringing. Then I left a message, calm, steady, please just look at the timestamp. It is not from my location, I can prove it. But he never called back. I emailed my mother that night, attached screenshots, highlighted the time difference, wrote everything out clearly, step by step, no emotion, just facts. And the only response I got was a single line the next morning. We do not want to hear excuses. I even wrote Ava a message I rewrote 5 times before sending, explaining what I found, reminding her of the night I stayed up helping her, the money I wired, the calls I made for her. I ended it with, "You know me better than this." And she read it. I saw the read receipt come through, and then nothing. No reply, no question, just silence, like I had never mattered enough to even deserve a conversation. A week later, I drove to their house. I do not know why. Maybe I thought if they saw me standing there, if they had to look at me instead of a screen, something would shift. But when I rang the doorbell, my mother opened the door halfway, did not step outside, did not invite me in, just stood there and said, "You should not be here." And I remember saying, "Please, just give me 10 minutes. And she shook her head slowly like she was tired of me, like I was the problem that kept coming back. And then she said something that stayed with me longer than anything else. "You have already done enough," before closing the door, not slamming it, not angry, just final, like a decision that had already been made. I stood there for a while after that, staring at the door, listening to the quiet, realizing that there was no version of this where they would hear me, because they did not want the truth. They wanted a reason to let me go, and I had just been given that role. Over the next few weeks, the silence settled into something heavier. I stopped calling, stopped writing, but the absence did not feel like peace. It felt like something missing, like a space in my life that used to be filled with noise, expectations, demands, and now there was just nothing. I would reach for my phone out of habit, thinking to text my mother about something small, or ask Ava how things were going, and then remember there was no one on the other end anymore. I had lost my entire family without a single conversation, without a chance to defend myself, and for a while, I kept replaying everything, wondering what I missed, what I could have done differently. Until one night, sitting alone in my apartment, I looked at my phone, at the empty call log, at the messages that were never answered, and something inside me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet realization that I had been trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided it did not exist, and for the first time, I did not reach out again. I just sat there, breathing, and understood that if I kept chasing them, I would lose what little of myself I had left. And that was the moment I stopped asking to be heard, and started asking a different question entirely. What would my life look like if I stopped fixing theirs? I did not rebuild my life in one moment. It started with something small, almost unnoticeable. The morning after I decided to stop reaching out, I woke up without checking my phone, no messages to read, no one to respond to, just silence. And for the first time, it did not feel like rejection. It felt like space. So I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop, not to fix someone else's problem, but to finally look at my own. I had spent years solving financial issues, organizing chaos, building plans for people who never acknowledged it, and I realized those skills did not disappear just because they stopped calling me. So I started taking freelance work, small at first, helping local businesses clean up their operations, reviewing contracts, finding inefficiencies, things I had done quietly for my family but never claimed as my own. And slowly, one project turned into another, one referral into 2, and within a year, I was working with clients who actually listened when I spoke, who paid for my time, who respected my decisions. I did not tell anyone from my past. There was no one to tell, but I kept building, Step by step, late nights, early mornings, learning things I should have been allowed to learn years ago, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I finally had something that belonged only to me. 2 years later, I signed a lease for a small office downtown, nothing flashy, just a clean space with a window that faced the street. And on the first day, I placed a simple metal nameplate on the desk. Lily Harper, operations consultant. I remember staring at it for a long time, not because it was impressive, but because it was mine. No one gave it to me, no one approved it, no one could take it away. That nameplate became something more than a label. It was proof that I existed outside of the role they had assigned me, that I was not just the person who fixed things for free. I was someone who built something of value. Over time, my work grew. I partnered with a small legal firm that handled business restructuring, and I became the person they called when things were already falling apart, when companies needed someone to step in quietly, assess the damage, and find a way forward. I never advertised myself. I did not need to. The work spoke for itself. And for the first time in my life, people trusted me without questioning my worth. 3 years passed like that, steady, quiet, real, until one afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a case file from the firm. A mid-sized retail business facing serious financial and contractual issues, the kind of situation I had seen before, the kind I knew how to handle, and as I flipped through the documents, one detail made me stop. A name, familiar in a way that felt distant and immediate at the same time. I read it again, slower this time, and my chest tightened because the company I was being asked to help was not just any client, it was theirs. And in that moment, sitting in my office with my name on the desk in front of me, everything connected back to that night. The dining room, the envelope, the silence, and I realized something they still did not know. The only person who could fix what was about to collapse was the one they had already thrown away. The meeting did not happen the way I imagined it would. There was no dramatic entrance, no silence falling over a crowded room, just a quiet conference space on the 12th floor of a downtown building. Glass walls, a long table, A wide, B wide, B wide, B wide, and 3 familiar faces sitting on the other side, older than I remembered, smaller somehow. My father avoided my eyes at first. My mother kept her hands folded in her lap, and Ava looked at me like she was trying to recognize someone she used to know. The lawyer beside me introduced me simply. "This is the consultant assigned to your case." And for a moment, none of them spoke. Then my father finally looked up, really looked at me, and I saw it. The shift, the realization. The same person they had dismissed was now sitting across from them with the authority they needed, not because I forced it, not because I planned it, but because life had moved forward without them. They started explaining the situation: financial strain, contract disputes, suppliers pulling out, the same kind of collapse I had spent years quietly preventing. And as they spoke, I listened, not as a daughter, but as a professional. I asked questions, took notes, pointed out inconsistencies. This is God overwatching. And then I showed them something they had not seen, the same email they blamed me for years ago, the one that started everything. I placed a printed copy on the table next to a report from the firm's forensic review, timestamps, server origins, metadata, all verified, all documented. The email did not come from me. It came from an internal account connected to Ava's own system. The room went quiet, not shocked, not explosive, just still. Ava's face changed first, confusion, then something heavier, something closer to understanding. My mother looked down at the paper like she could not hold it in her hands, and my father leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing for a long second. No one argued. No one raised their voice. Because the truth did not need that. It was already there, clear and undeniable. "I did not know," Ava said finally, her voice low, almost to herself, and I believed her, not because it erased what happened, but because it explained how easily something could become a story when no one wanted to question it. My father opened his mouth like he was going to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, but I did not wait for it. I had spent years waiting for words that never came, and I did not need them anymore. I closed the folder in front of me and said, calmly, I can help restructure the business. I can outline a plan, but I will not be part of your family again. There was no anger in my voice, no accusation, just a boundary stated clearly, and that was the moment everything settled into place. Not perfectly, not completely healed, but real. My mother nodded slowly, like she understood something she had not before. Ava looked at me with a kind of regret that did not ask for forgiveness, and my father said nothing at all, which felt more honest than anything else he could have said. I stood up, gathered my things, and as I walked out of that room, I did not feel victorious. I did not feel empty either. I felt steady, like I was finally standing in a life that belonged to me. Later that evening, I went back to my office, the city lights reflecting through the window, and I placed my hand on the small metal nameplate on my desk, the same one I had stared at years ago. It had not changed, but I had, and for the first time, the silence around me did not feel like something missing. It felt like peace, the kind you build slowly, the kind you protect carefully. Life is not perfect now. There are still moments when I wonder what could have been different. Still days when memories surface without warning. But they do not define me anymore. They are just part of the story that led me here. And if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Your value is not something others get to decide for you. Not your family, not your past, not even your mistakes. Sometimes the hardest thing you will ever do is walk away from the people who taught you to stay, but that is where your life begins again. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are the one always fixing things, always holding everything together while no one sees you, I hope you know that you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt, without explanation, because healing does not come from being understood by others. It comes from finally understanding yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this, for listening, for being here. Wherever you are in the world, you are not as alone as you think. My name is Lily Harper. I am 29 years old, and the lesson I carry with me is simple. You do not have to stay where you are not valued to prove that you are worthy. And if this story stayed with you, there are more stories like this waiting for you. Stories about finding your voice, your boundaries, your way back to yourself. Take your time, stay a little longer, and I will meet you there.